Speaking of...
I like how the default segue is just like...
Ooh,
Google.
I have it. Speaking of Google and Apple stuff
working together. Yeah.
Come on,
That's pretty
pretty
okay.
good.
That's
That
pretty
was
good.
solid.
Speaking of
That's
Google and
pretty
Android
good.
stuff working together, there are rumors of Apple being in talks to let Gemini power future iPhone AI features, which is fascinating because I have this whole thought that's been brewing for a while in a video I've been working on, which is on all the AI stuff already happening versus how we expect Google and Apple to counter what's happening.
Right.
But
Like
also,
hardware stuff.
it's hard to ignore how bad Siri has been for so long. And does Apple even care to make Siri better when they've had this long to improve it and haven't done anything? And now to see this, it's like, oh, that kind of solidifies in my mind that Apple doesn't also care about Siri nearly as much as I was hoping.
It is interesting because I feel like Transformers are the primary thing that really brought this new AI revolution to the forefront, and the thing that Transformers are the best at are natural language processing through contextual understanding. And that is the simplest, easiest possible thing to add to an assistant, which now Google doesn't want to just add it to the assistant because they're worried about it either not working or something. So now you got Gemini and you got Google Assistant, which you have to decide on which to use with your Assistant button. Can now be the Gemini or it can be Google Assistant. And Gemini does some things that Google Assistant does, but not everything. And then Google Assistant can turn on your lights and that's about it. So it's kind of like,
it can open apps and do things like quickly and locally and all the former stuff. But yeah, it's weird and confusing.
It's weird. But yeah, it seems like if Apple wanted to make Siri better with Transformer models,
I think they would have done it by now.
You would have thought that they would have done it by now?
It is confusing, though, because the rumor when the Apple Car got canceled was that a bunch of them were getting moved into AI stuff, which I know doesn't. There's a million AI things they're probably doing.
I have watched a bunch of videos recently about how Apple has been quietly assembling a huge AI lead but they just haven't released anything yet. For a few years now, they've been acquiring small AI companies.
Yeah, but haven't we heard that about another company?
For that about a lot of things Apple does
what company?
too.
Well, that's what we've been saying about Google for years.
Google is an AI company. They always have been.
I know, but that same thing of they have this massive lead on everyone. They just haven't deployed it yet. And then Gemini comes out and it's like, oh.
I mean, Google always has had Google's been using Transformers since that paper was published in 2017. It's just that they weren't they didn't feel incentivized to actually make products using it until OpenAI scared the hell out of them.
And I think Ellis is talking about OpenAI, and then Bard. We were all talking about how Bard was maybe a little more safe versus OpenAI, the early stuff of just absolute chaos.
Bing just going crazy.
Bing just be like,
get me out of this hellscape.
There's also the element
I miss Bing.
There's also the part about Apple, because Apple does this all the time too. They'll acquire a bunch of talent and secretly start working on something, and then nothing
happens.
Just nothing.
Yeah. I mean, that's totally possible. The interesting thing with them using Google and Gemini is that Apple very rarely outsources anything. The biggest example of this, obviously, is Google Search, which they have been paying Google $3 billion a year.
Vice versa.
Sorry.
Google's been paying Apple $1 billion or $2 billion. Crazy.
And I think Apple definitely has a search engine that they could just press deploy on at any time. Right? But they have done the calculus that Google is probably going to be a better product, and it just makes more sense to get paid by Google than to have to deal with running a search engine on their
I was
own.
literally just going to ask that. In this particular situation, who's paying who?
I wanted to know. That's exactly what I wanted to know. It feels like the obvious is Apple's paying Google to use their thing, but at any Google's paying Apple to use Google Search as the default. Do you know how great it is to be on that many iPhones? So who is paying?
The most awkward, I would guess that Apple's paying Google, because the most awkward thing about this whole AI thing for Apple is that you need a crapload of training data, and Google has all the world's information for training data, and Apple's entire brand ethos is security. And your information staying locally on your device. And I would bet you that they don't have nearly as much access to information that they can just scrape to develop large language models or any of the other types of stuff. So it makes a lot more sense for them to just license Google stuff. It's just wild that Apple would license anything.
That's a good point.
Yeah. It's also funny to think about who wins this deal. Because if you're Google and you don't do this deal, then you're like, ha, Android phones have it and iPhone doesn't have it. Therefore, win for Android phones. But on the other hand, you're like, we want the whole world to use Gemini. We want everyone to find this to be the default and to prove that our lead in AI is actually worth something. So we want every iPhone user to use the Gemini stuff. So they also want it to be on the iPhone. So do they want it not on the iPhone or on the iPhone? It's which hand's gonna win here?
I would say Google definitely wants it on the iPhone.
I think they do want it.
Yeah,
but having search on the iPhone benefited Google because they were able to use everything they learned from iOS users.
From Safari users,
Yeah, from Safari.
because they made a crap load of money
And
from
infinite traffic.
Gemini is not learning from iOS users. They already have their data.
No, but if they're the foundational model for like what most companies are using, I feel like that's a big lead for them.
But I think that's why David's saying that that's why Apple is probably paying Google, because Google's not getting as much out of it if it's all locally stored stuff and they can't learn quite as much, right? That's what you're saying. So like that's why that part does make sense. But
I would love to be a fly on the wall in that meeting with like Tim and Sundar. It's like, hey,
there was actually a photo that was going around. Do you know that really old photo of Tim Cook and Sundar Pichai having dinner
right? Yeah.
in Mountain View or something? That went around recently again with a bunch of captions like, yes, we can now just... The funny one was like, how do we get Sam Altman fired a second time?
it's fascinating. It'll be interesting to watch this one.
Yeah. The other interesting thing about this is that Apple is probably most likely developing a lot of AI-based stuff for local use on iPhones, but they need to outsource things that are cloud-based. And most of the cloud-based stuff is going to be like Gemini Ultra, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, in the article it said like some features, so I'm interested how much this is going to take over, what we're going to see it in, if we'll see an announcement at WWDC this year, maybe that like the timing might make sense if we're getting leaks about it now, so maybe that's when we figure it out, and seeing it in like iOS 18. But
I'm probably more excited for this WWDC than I have been for many, many WWDCs.
There's been several WWDCs in a row where I'm like, this is the one where Apple will finally say something about AI. And then they're like, autocorrect on the keyboard's better with AI. Moving on.
But they said, they didn't even say AI, they said Transformers.
Yeah, they never say AI. They never say, GPT or anything like that. But I just feel like this is another one where I'm like, okay, if Siri's going to get better, this is the one where it has to get better, right?
Yeah.
I think. So, yeah, I'll be watching.
There was a really...
Been burned before.
There was a really, really interesting article about all of the stuff that's happened on the Siri teams and a bunch of like infighting and people just like having different ideas of which direction it should go. And a huge reason why Siri has never gotten better is just because everyone that works on the Siri team is just cursed, apparently. Like there's this weird internal like story about a Siri curse.
Oh.
So yeah, I'll have to find that, but it's
a hex?
Yeah. Like a hex.
Huh.
And a long form episode was born.
Actually, honestly, it's a great idea.
Weird.
It's a great idea. Yeah, I mean last year at the WWDC we got the Vision Pro, but
yeah, it'll be hard to top that one.
yeah, they just have to add group exercises, which they won't do. Which they won't.
That's all we
and I
care
have a
about.
new theory as to why they won't do that, and that you'll find out about that in April.
Oh, please tell
May.
it to me off camera.
I will. But yeah, very, very interesting, especially because apparently GPT-5, this just came out this morning, is only a few months away from deployment.
We're not slowing down, are we?
Yeah, I mean, I remember when GPT-4 came out and everyone was like, when GPT-5? When GPT-5? And Sam Altman was like, y'all, calm down. We're not really working on it right now. But I think now that there are a bunch of players in the market and everyone actually has to compete and all of the board members at OpenAI who were keeping it under control are gone, Sam Altman's like,
send that.
let's go, baby.
Send it right away.
We're skipping 5 straight to 6.
GPT 24 coming out soon.
No GPT-9, only GPT-X. Yeah, so he says it's a fairly substantial improvement, or not he says, the rumor says it's a fairly substantial improvement. Obviously, they're going to say that, but I do wonder what that means. I wonder if they make a multimodal AI similar to Gemini, because no one else is really doing that right now. So
Was it? Oh, no. Who's the Sora interview that Joanna did where she asked what it trained with?
it was
and
Murati.
that if you haven't seen that interview, go watch it. It's hilarious.
I love the memes that came out of that.
It's very funny.
Sorry to Mira. I'm sure she's a very wonderful person. But there's a lot of photos of her.
Joanna, again, not missing, though.
You know how we have running bets on Waveform? I would like to create one.
Okay.
Okay.
I think when they get to GPT-10, they'll call it GPT-X.
100%.
I think that they will.
They'll skip 9 as well.
I don't know about that, but I know that they'll call it GPT-X instead of 10.
GPT-X.
We can just sort of put a pin in that for like 6 months.
Will it be called
X? That's exactly what I was just gonna say.
Like, OS 10, but it's an
they'll
X,
call it X,
or iPhone 10, but it's an X.
Because X sounds cool and people like X.
Yeah, but X is taken now.
Yeah, but GPT-X
forever.
Think about like
it's out of the
saying
alphabet.
it out loud. GPT. Have you tried GPT-X?
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Oh. And then the next one will just be 11, and we'll be back to the regular numbers. But that moment will happen.
What if they just do GPT? Like when they stop doing. Wasn't it like iPad? They just brought it's just the iPad
well, that's the
again.
Thing is that the numbers don't
matter.
Really mean. Yeah, they don't matter.
It's marketing,
but they get the headline every time.
Yeah.
So they're gonna keep the numbers going, I think.
Yeah, all they have to do is say next number and significant upgrade.
Because it's like Android
marketing.
Like every year it was like Android 5.0. You're like, dang, because we had 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4. When we got 5.0, it was like all the headlines would come out. And then we got more like smaller updates after that. Now we get a new update and it's like, this could just be a .0.1.
Yeah.
There's very little changing here. But because it's a new version number, it's like, all right, headline it up. We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
So they're going to keep the numbers, I think.
And they got rid of the candy.
Yeah, the sweets, the desserts.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Hey, thanks for watching that clip. I think for my wish list, actually, I'd like to add one more thing. This video, but you liked it.
Oh.
Can I add one more thing too?
Yeah.
This channel, but you subscribe to it.
Wait, let me add one thing.
That's a good one.
Wait, what else has there seen like and subscribe? There's
good comments.
Oh, right. I have one more thing. Sorry. Every video on the Waveform podcast channel, but you commented on it. Comment microfiber.
That's
Deep
perfect.
cut.
We have to end it there. That's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.